Okay, we had a couple groups who couldn't stop talking about this topic. And I'm going to have them come up and just share a little bit about where their group went in terms of this conversation. So if you'll turn your attention up here, and Tiffany and Jordy. They haven't quite taken a break yet.
Okay, so when we started to speak to this, it has become kind of clear to us that there is a little bit of confusion in the definition as to what exactly an interim assessment is. And looking at the guide, I think we're still a little bit confused. We need some clarity. So, no, we know it's there. We're still confused, though, after reading it. All right, so my take on it, I'm going to give you guys my take, and then Jordy's going to give you her take. And we've come to some sort of agreement that we're both sort of halfway right, I think. So we'll let you all see if you have had some sort of similar thoughts. My thought was the interim assessment was the testing of the wing halfway through, because if ultimately the summative is to do that rubric with all the design things, all the measurements, it would make sense that halfway through you're testing progress towards that goal. It's an interim for that unit. So that was my thought on where it was. Okay.
Okay. I think we're in agreement, though, that it's best practice what she's just talking about. It's really the word choice and how we're rolling it out and explaining it. About interim, when I keep hearing that interim relates to the course goals for the year or the course, whether it's a semester or a year-long course. So the interim is benchmarking the overall goals for the course. That's how I'm interpreting it. And also because I keep getting the information like from Justin, right, that it has to be validated by the state, it has to have, so we were talking about, right, in an aviation unit, it might be lift, it might be all these, so the big ideas are on that interim. And that a quality summative could act as an interim. So when I think that my summative could be my interim on the goals for the year, I cannot use the language of interim in the middle of a unit because that to me would be a formative. I think we're doing the same thing, but I would say that is still formative because it's still in process. But then we pull up the definition that Senia has in that new document, and it's not clear. And I think we're doing the same thing, but I think it's really clear language-wise, not that one is right or wrong, but that it's clearly defined so that when we say to teachers, if I said to them, I'm looking for interim in your unit, I think at this point, from how I've coached it in my building, I would really throw them.
Because you have been calling them formative.
Because I would call that formative. So
Which led to another conversation about the inclusion of summative, interim, and formative on each unit plan. So if there is that confusion in language, are we then confusing teachers when we ask for the interims per unit? Anyway, so that was our 25-minute discussion.
So do you see how confusing teachers might be?
Kim, you're saying someone needs to give Dr. Morgan some of the feedback. Yeah. And I think, again, we talked yesterday a little bit about how it also goes back to the teacher's purpose. The same test can have a different purpose for different teachers.
But we're saying that the
right?
interims are being standardized. That's
Yeah.
so they need to be called, only the interims are called interims. Everything else is formative.
Okay. Jamie?
So you have interim for the assessment that system performance is doing, tied to the GVC. When you design stage 2, you have to have an interim in stage 2 as per the site rubric for standard 2. So when you design, but her document is about the year, and it's about balanced assessment. When you backwards plan, so I have to stand somewhere else. When you backwards plan, you have to have a summative, an interim, and formative when you backwards plan your unit. So for this wing design, do you think the instructor waited 6 weeks to test whether they could build it or not? And you all do interim along the way, you know it. We just have to codify it better. So don't confuse. It is true in the district we use the term interim on the definition sheet says it is the predictor for the summative. So you need predictors for the district summative assessments and your semester assessments, but when you do a performance assessment unit, you also need an interim. And the interim should have components from the summative so we can do a good job of adjusting our instruction.
Okay, so I just get back to the point of assess it. I mean, what do we want to do? We want to assess their learning at multiple points, right? I understand there's differences between formative, summative, and interim. But if we spend too much time figuring out that we're all talking about the same thing and we're not doing actual good assessments, then it's for naught. And what I compare this to was kind of funny. I had a really hard time figuring out the difference between an accommodation and a modification. So I said, forget it, just help the kid. Because I don't care what it is. So that's where we have to make sure, and in the GVC I kind of said the same thing, we have to make sure that our definitions and forms, and I think that's less important than talking about good assessment. So sorry, I'll stop.
Did Jordy want?
I just have a clarifying question that I need answering. So are we getting stuck between what the district interim assessment is and just a regular interim assessment? Because whenever you plan a unit, you have to have something along the way. I mean, that's just common. That's what
I mean,
teaching is.
I don't know if this is okay. Absolutely, that's what we were just saying. There is a unit interim and there is a district interim, and we need to bring clarity and definition to those two things because that's where Tiffany and I got hung up. We were talking about two separate.
I agree.
Yeah. Good point. And you know what? That should be clearer. So thank you for that fine point clarification. You're going to have some work time now, okay? In your groups, whoever you were working with, I don't know if it was a partner, a trio, you're going to be looking at your non-academic unit that you began yesterday, the non-academic unit. Look at stage 1 and create, thank you, like the baseball, whatever. Create a formative, an interim, and a summative assessment for stage 2. Now let me share one fine point of clarification. The biggest mistake that people can make is that they lack the alignment because they'll have 3 outcomes and like one summative that doesn't even assess whatever that outcome is. If your outcome is about collaborating, you have to measure collaboration, okay? For me, the way that I make sure that mine is really specifically aligned is I take each outcome and underneath it I write formative, interim, summative. Outcome, formative, interim, summative. And sometimes I find that my summative matches like all 3 of my outcomes, but sometimes not. That's one way to really make sure that you have that fine alignment. Okay, thank you ladies. Look, here we go. Thoughts?
Since you guys haven't seen your feedback from stage 1 from our part yesterday, take a couple minutes to look through that feedback and make sure your stage 1 is in alignment before moving to your stage 2.
Okay. All right, let's get to work. Okay, you guys, you know what? Let me bring you back together just for 1 second. One clarification, please. Listen up, please. That second step up there, where it says create an evaluation tool, we may not have time to get to that today. That would be like the rubric that you would present to students at the very beginning of the unit. If your group gets done creating the formative, interim, summative, and you have time to create the tool, go ahead. But that is that's going to be optional for our time together today, okay? Thank you.